Good morning. I am Maria Figueroa, a member of the Board of Trustees of Tahoma UU Congregation. As we begin our gathering, I respectfully acknowledge that I speak to you today from occupied Puyallup ancestral land. I pay respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to their descendants and all Indigenous people. We welcome all who are joining us with longing for community, the hope for peace, and who are seeking justice. We are a diverse congregation which encourages each one who comes through our doors to find their own truth and belief. We invite all to join us in a search for meaning and community, guided by reason, respect for each other, and by love. While we continue to meet online due to the surge of COVID cases from the Delta variant, we are glad to have this virtual program. In addition to welcoming our folks local to Tacoma, we also welcome guests outside our traditional geographic area. You can find all of our program announcements this week in our e-news and listed on our church calendar. Here are some of the highlights. This coming Saturday, October 9th, the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department will host a walk-up vaccine clinic in our church parking lot, offering first, second, or booster shots of the Pfizer vaccine. A second vaccine clinic will be held on Saturday, October 30th. The clinic is open to anyone ages 12 or older, and the vaccine is free and no appointment is required. You can find information for registering for Chalice Circles in both the e-news and on the church website. Chalice Circles are forming to begin this month in October. We're planning to have options for groups to meet online or to meet in the church sanctuary using safe practices, including limiting group sizes, social distancing, and wearing face masks. See details in the e-news. Let us know what times and days work best for you. Then Mary Ryan will be back in contact with you as the Chalice Circles are formed. This fall, the Pacific Northwest UU congregations from Washington, Oregon, and Alaska are joining together to offer religious education programs on Sundays for elementary grades for 1 to 5. Sundays for middle school grades 6 to 8, and Wednesdays evenings for high schools grade 9 to 12. See the e-news or the blog post on the website and contact Nancy Slocum to register. Adult volunteers can also register with Nancy Slocum. Following worship service online today, we have online and in-person opportunities to connect in community. Immediately following our service, you can join us for social time in Zoom meeting. We'll paste this link at the end of the worship service, or you can find it via the church calendar. At noon, you can join us for social time in person at Wapato Park. Links for all our programs can be found in our weekly e-news or our church calendar. One piece of news you can find in e-news this week is a church building safety update from Reverend Joe. Friends, please read your e-news when it arrives. It is the primary channel for you to stay connected and informed. Our staff works hard to assure your e-news contains all the news and information you ask for and expect. Thank you. And thank you too for your ongoing financial support to our congregation that makes all of this possible. Our programs and staff who create and facilitate the programs and the connections that we make through our congregation. Now let us join together in worship.
Good morning. All I've just pasted into the chat are chalice lighting. Please join me we light this chalice in deep respect for the mystery and holiness of life, in honor and gratitude for those who have gone before, with love and compassion for those who dwell among us, and with hope and faith for the generations to come. And now I have pasted into the chat some options for you to offer your financial gifts to the work of this congregation. Thank you for your consideration to support our church during this unprecedented time apart. Follow the link or click on the link in the chat or text your donation to contribute your support for our church members and staff to keep our congregation connected in new and dynamic ways. Every little bit helps, and while we are physically apart, our gifts are stronger together. And now join me in our dedication of the offering. We dedicate ourselves and our offerings to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of love we call community, both within and beyond these walls.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to October. Already October, and in this fall season, in this month, we begin focusing on what it means to cultivate relationships. And for our opening words, I offer a poem, Woven Anew, by Reverend Scott Taylor. Come with your joy, your incurable curiosity, your hunger for hope, but bring too your broken heart, your cracked confidence, your ruptured relationships. Let this today be a place of repair. May the words spoken become webbing, weaving again a path back to wisdom, back to forgotten worth, back to a place of peace, now buried by all the striving worry and wounds. May the sounds circling in this space sweep you up like a stream whose currents long to carry you home. And may the common breath so sweetly shared between us remind you that loneliness eventually lifts, that we are tethered more tightly than it seems sometimes, that together our hearts can mend and our world can be woven anew. Come, let us begin.
Wow. I'm here in the sanctuary today and dealing with some new technology. I'm going to put that forward as a bit of good news because it means that we are playing around with new equipment so that when it's time to reopen our sanctuary, we will have everything we need to be able to be here in person, but for people who still want to participate from home via Zoom, we will also be broadcasting. So we're trying out some new equipment today, a new way of doing things for me. So if I'm a little clumsy, I hope you'll forgive me and know it's in the spirit of getting ready to come back together. So good morning, everyone. I'm Nancy Slocum, and I'm the Director of Religious Exploration for Children and Youth here at Tahoma Unitarian Universalist Congregation, and it is very good to be together this morning. This month, our theme is all about cultivating relationships. To cultivate means to take care of something, to help it grow. So I invite children to come close to hear a story about cultivating relationships. You know, we cultivate gardens, for instance, and we cultivate relationships, relationships with other people, relationships with animals, with plants, with our earth. We cultivate these relationships and we take care of these relationships to help them grow. And sometimes there are things that interfere, that get in the way of relationships growing. Have you ever thought, met somebody new and thought about becoming their friend, but you were a little uncertain about how to make that happen? What sort of things make that difficult? Sometimes it's because we don't get the chance to see them very often and we're just not in touch with them. Sometimes we might feel shy about reaching out to them, and sometimes we might just feel a little nervous or uncomfortable connecting with them because we sense them as being different from us in some way. I remember when I was a young girl, I was about 6 years old, and my family hosted a teacher from Japan he was visiting the United States, and he stayed with us for about a week. He wanted to learn about schools in the United States. And my parents had told me he was going to be staying at our house and that he didn't speak much English. Well, I'd never met anyone who was from Japan before, and I never had to communicate with someone who didn't speak much English. And I guess I was nervous about it because I remember getting off the school bus the day he was going to arrive and be there when I got home from school. And instead of going into the house, I hid out in my backyard. I was nervous about going inside and meeting this man. Well, my mom was wondering where I was, and she came out and she found me and she took me by the hand and she comforted me, but she had me go in and meet Morinaga-san, or Mr. Morinaga. And it didn't take long before we became friends. I found out that he was a dad and he had a daughter about my age. He gave me a small Japanese doll that I still have to this day. And he helped me draw pictures for Halloween. This was in October. Be different, be brave, be you. The author, Sonia Sotomayor, had a letter to readers at the start of the book. I won't read the whole letter, but here is part of it. And I'm quoting her here. I hope by seeing yourself or your friends in this story, you will understand that we're all different, and you will find that notion comforting and empowering. I hope too that you will recognize what we have in common. Instead of fearing our differences or ignoring them, we can shed light on them and explore them together. And if you ever wonder why someone is doing something different from other kids, just ask. That is our time for all ages. I leave you with the words we used to sing our kids out of the sanctuary. We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. To nurture the spark of your precious life, we hold you in our love as you go.
Friends, I have 2 readings to share with you this morning. Our first reading, since we are a community of faith, our first reading sheds some perspective on what it means to minister. What does ministry mean for a faith community? This is from Gordon McKeeman. Ministry is a quality of relationship between and among human beings that beckons forth hidden possibilities, inviting people into deeper, more constant, more reverent relationship with the world and with one another, carrying forward a long heritage of hope and liberation that has dignified and informed the human venture over many centuries, being present with, to, and for others in their terrors and torments, in their grief, misery, and pain, knowing that those feelings are our feelings too. Our next reading looks at relationships from the point of view of empathy and compassion. This is by Leslie Jameson. Empathy isn't just something that happens to us, a meteor shower of synapses firing across the brain. It's also a choice we make to pay attention, to extend ourselves. It's made of exertion, that dowdier cousin of impulse. Sometimes we care for another because we know we should, or because it's asked for, but this doesn't make our caring hollow. The act of choosing simply means we've committed ourselves to a set of behaviors greater than the sum of our individual inclinations. This confession of effort chafes against the notion that empathy should always rise unbidden, that genuine means the same thing as unwilled, that intentionality is the enemy of love. But I believe in intention, and I believe in work. Beloveds, every one of us leaves a trail of lessons behind us as we grow through life. On our paths, there are times we walk on our own and times when we walk with others, as a couple, as family, as friends, as a group or team. As we journey on our paths on our own or with others, we carry in heart and mind the lessons we've learned along the path behind us, as life's new lessons continually fall upon the path before us. On the path before us, there will be lessons we choose to persevere through, so we might find a way to carry their learnings with us as we move forward day by day. And there will also be lessons we choose to avoid or abandon before we've been able to fully learn them, which can often bring about a particularly poignant phenomenon where we unintentionally find ourselves repeating those lessons a bit further down our path. But regardless of whether we choose to persevere through life's lessons or to abandon and avoid them, they are all the lessons we leave as we journey through our lives. I know each of us can look back and reflect on particular life lessons we chose to abandon for one reason or another behind us on our path. Lessons we leave as parents, mentors, friends, siblings, spouses, partners, children. One lesson out of the many I chose to leave comes to mind. It was 1985. I was 20 years old. I'd come home from university for the weekend, and my dad and I were watching TV in the family room. Now, my father was one of the most intelligent men I've ever known, a gifted philosopher and theologian, a well-rounded gentleman through and through, devoted to family life. My dad loved holy days and holidays, sports and performing arts, outdoor family vacations, and contemplating the cosmos and the ethos of life's journeys. I love my father. And prior to that day at home in 1985, I had come out to my family just a few years before. And I knew my father was struggling to reconcile his personal disappointment and shame in having an openly gay son, struggling to reconcile that with his love and concern for my well-being. Being gay went against his personal Catholic theology. And I now know that by 1985, those first years of my college studies and visits home, during those, he was also witnessing my soul searchings for a field of study that fulfilled me, that would provide for me, and that would get me graduated in 4 years. So while we were sitting there watching TV, as usual, Dad announced the hour that he and my dear stepmother and I would all leave for Mass the next morning. Now, I had stopped going to Mass once I moved to school and came out, and my dad knew this. What he wasn't very aware of were the specific challenges I was persevering through as life's lessons of what it meant to be out and proud in 1985 began emerging on my path. Many new lessons of love and relationship and empowerment, and many new lessons of hate and oppression, and a new pandemic of a disease that was killing many, many of us. My lived experience of marginalization was newly underway back then, particularly as I came to terms with not being fully accepted in Catholic parishes, nor our extended Catholic family culture. But in that 20-year-old moment, I was afraid to articulate such things with my Catholic theologian father. I hadn't yet learned how to persevere through that particular fear. So I told my dad I wouldn't be going to Mass, and we both turned our attention back to the TV. Then, after several minutes, Dad asked, "Well, son, have you ever considered becoming a priest?" His question was like a punch to my stomach. I reacted out of pain, telling him he was trying to force me back into a closet, that I'd rather cut off my arm than join an institution that wanted me to feel ashamed just for being the man God made me to be. Dad defensively and angrily refuted me, saying a priest's life was a wonderful life spent in service and community with the greatest institution on earth. But I was fed up that, like that institution, my father seemed to want me to change who I was born to be. So there it was, a moment of conflict, leaving a lesson to be learned right in front of both of us, disguised as a conflict and hidden by our hurt feelings. We remained defensively dug into our differing beliefs arguing only a little bit longer until we fell into silence, watching the TV. I didn't go to Mass the next morning, and we never spoke of that moment again. A few years later, Dad suffered a heart attack. As he lingered in a coma for several days, I had conversations with him to try to bring loving closure and reconciliation to our relationship. And he passed away. And now, 36 years later, here I am, an ordained minister in a faith that does more fully welcome all of who I am. The lessons we leave. Reflecting on that conflict moment in the family room, and now knowing my father's life would be cut short, I now ask myself, what if that much younger me had been able to see my dad's question all those years ago as his caring observation of my affinities and intelligences? What if he had realized that I could thrive as a leader in a faith different from his own? Because he was on to something. From his chair in the family room that afternoon, he was trying to honor my intelligence in matters of faith and justice, even though I couldn't yet. What if my father and I could have found some common ground in our differing personal faiths that may have allowed us to work through that life lesson just a little bit more that day? Some common faithful ground which might have opened a pathway for us to exchange views more honorably, more empathetically. Instead, he and I fell into a stance so many parents and children do. We dug into our personal convictions and chose to remain there. Beloveds, my story here is not entirely unique. Every one of us could share an equally painful story about our most loved and trusted relations suffering a loss of empathy and faith. We all know too well that when we cling to our own convictions rather than opening to a different point of view, we can cause painful absences of empathy with one another. We find ourselves spending days at a time, stressed or grouchy about any number of things that cause us to get into conflict with our beloveds. When our beloved relationships fall into conflict, note that I say when and not if. When they do, we ache to reconcile as parent and child, spouse and spouse, colleague and colleague. We ache to reconcile when a lack of empathy and faith causes suffering between any two or more of us. As we enter into our liturgical theme of cultivating relationships this month, I wonder if our faith in our UU principles could serve as a guide here. I wonder if perhaps we become too well practiced in viewing those principles as guides only for our faith in social justice and social change, as we strive to dismantle mountains of injustice in our world. But what if we take a different view? What if we reflect on how our principles might help generate reconciliation between beloveds? Perhaps injustice occurs when we fail to honor the interdependent web of one beloved relationship. Perhaps our principles can open a space for reconciliation between two people. When you ache to learn the lessons the two of you are leaving, those personal, concerning lessons that form both of you, perhaps not because you resolved them, but because you lost faith and chose to leave them. Leaving those lessons is formational as well. If the father and son story I've shared with you in any way as a parent, child, sibling, partner, or friend, if that story resonates with you in any way, then I ask you to imagine this. Imagine how much less suffering we might experience in our lives now if we'd drawn upon our faithful principles to help reconcile a conflict then. Imagine where the lessons you've left behind may have carried you if, in those moments, you'd chosen to find some common ground of faith in the inherent worth, dignity, and compassion between the two of you. The mutual encouragement the two of you develop through your free and responsible searches for truth, meaning, and conscience. The shared goal of interdependent peace and acceptance of one another. Imagine if, in your moments of conflict with someone you hold dear, you were to choose to pause and summon your personal faith in our principles and open your heart to their powers of personal reconciliation. Just a little bit more. Blessed be. Our closing words, beloveds, from Reverend Gretchen Haley. What our faith asks of us, what our faith imagines for us, is that somehow, right at that moment when our hearts break, we will find our way to see through that heartbreak. We will stay put, not close off, not run away, not hurt back, but keep on being in relationship, doing what we can to repair the world and each other.
Please join as we recite the words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and by this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.